It wasn't the first time I thought I was going to die. You feel like you're living on bonus time.
The day he fled Russia, he said he'd never go back. He went back more than 50 times. The day he stood inside the Kremlin, in front of one of Putin's closest allies, they asked him to hand over the encryption keys to his own app. He smiled and said no. 10 years later, he was sitting in a French interrogation room. This is a story about one man that at least 5 governments have tried to control. Over the next few minutes, we're going to walk through the parts of this story almost nobody puts together, starting with the moment Telegram stopped being a business and became an escape plan. The version everyone knows goes like this. Durov lost his company, VK, in 2014, fled, and built Telegram out of the wreckage. That's not quite what happened. Telegram already existed. It launched in 2013, while Durov was still running VK, still inside the company that would eventually push him out, and already under direct pressure from Russian authorities. So ask yourself the obvious question. Why was a tech CEO quietly building an encrypted communication platform while he was still sitting in the CEO chair of a completely different company? The answer starts 2 years earlier. During Russia's opposition protests in 2011 and 2012, authorities ordered Durov to shut down VK groups being used to organize demonstrations. His response wasn't a legal filing. It was a photo of his dog, posted right next to the official government request. That same night, armed security agents showed up at his apartment, tried to get in. He refused to open the door until they left. Durov later said,
And I also told myself, if I'm going to survive this, I'm definitely launching a secure messaging app.
In other words, Telegram was never just a startup idea. It was a contingency plan. 2 years after that, the actual exile happened. He refused to hand over user data tied to protesters in Ukraine, published the government's official requests publicly for the world to see. He sold his stake in VK. And here's the part almost nobody mentions. A leaked border-crossing database showed he actually entered Russia more than 50 times between 2015 and 2021. That alone doesn't prove he was cooperating with the Kremlin, but it wrecks the clean narrative. And it turns out he wasn't the only one moving quietly. Some of the people who actually built Telegram's infrastructure were doing the exact same thing, staying invisible. The public face of Telegram is Pavel. His older brother, Nikolai Durov, is a mathematician and programmer, and he's the one who actually designed MT-Proto, the encryption protocol Telegram's entire security reputation is built on. Nikolai stayed almost completely out of the public eye, despite being the technical backbone of the product Pavel sells to the world as private. But Nikolai isn't the strangest name in this story. A joint investigation combed through documents from an unrelated commercial court case in Florida and stumbled onto the name of a nearly unknown Russian network engineer, Vladimir Vedenev. According to those documents, his company managed part of Telegram's server infrastructure and allocated thousands of IP addresses for it. He was the only person authorized to physically access Telegram equipment inside a specific data center in Miami. He held signing power on behalf of Telegram and Durov personally. In one contract, his signature shows up twice, once as director of his own company, once in a role tied to Telegram's financial management. People who worked around Telegram for years said they'd never even heard his name, despite the level of access he had. Now, companies linked to Vedenev were doing work for some seriously sensitive clients, Russia's FSB, and a computing center connected to tools used to track and identify internet users. Vedenev himself later admitted he had a contact inside the FSB and that he'd responded to security-related requests involving Russian internet users. He flatly denied ever handing over Telegram data specifically. So here's the honest version. No exaggeration and no softening. If Russia had influence over Telegram, why did it spend years trying to ban it? 2018. A Russian court ordered a full ban on Telegram after it refused to hand over access to secret chats. The execution was chaos. Russia blocked somewhere between 16 and 18 million IP addresses tied to Amazon and Google Cloud infrastructure just trying to knock out one app. Banks, stores, booking platforms, entire unrelated services went down. Telegram kept running for a massive share of its users the entire time. 2020. Russia quietly lifted the ban because it had functionally failed to enforce it. Fast forward to February 2026.
The Russian government announced it's limiting access to Telegram, saying the move is to protect citizens.
Shortly after, Russian authorities opened a criminal investigation into Durov himself on suspicion of assisting terrorist activity. Years before any of this, his biographer met with him in St. Petersburg and noticed his behavior had completely changed. He was watching cars approach crosswalks. He picked a corner table at a restaurant, then pulled back the curtain just to make sure no one was standing behind it, listening. That's a man preparing for something specific, and he was right to be scared. Because the same year he started acting like someone was watching him, someone actually was, just not from Moscow. According to a Wall Street Journal investigation, French and Emirati intelligence carried out a joint operation in 2017, codenamed Purple Music. The operation reportedly succeeded in hacking Durov's iPhone. 1 year later, Durov had lunch with French President Emmanuel Macron. They discussed moving Telegram's headquarters to Paris and granting him French citizenship. The headquarters never moved. The citizenship did. Le Monde tried to find out who backed the decision and why. The relevant records committee ruled his naturalization file would stay sealed for 50 years. That same period, Emirati sovereign funds Mubadala and Abu Dhabi Catalyst Partners invested $150 million combined into Telegram bonds. The country reportedly involved in hacking his phone became a significant financial backer of his company. He picked up Emirati citizenship too. That's how governments treat a man who single-handedly controls a communication layer used by over 1 billion people. Then, France did something that made it very clear protection was never actually the deal. His arrest at a Paris airport in August 2024 looked, to the outside world, like it came out of nowhere. A French administrative document tells a different story. Arrest warrants for Pavel Durov and his brother Nikolai were issued back in March 2024, 5 months before he ever set foot on French soil. It started when Telegram failed to respond to a French judicial request. Within weeks of his arrest, Telegram changed policies it had refused to touch for years. It killed the People Nearby feature. It expanded its policy to share phone numbers and IP addresses with authorities, but only with a valid legal order tied to a criminal case. The man who smiled and said no inside the Kremlin sat in a French interrogation room a decade later and quietly gave up part of what he'd spent his career refusing to give. By this point, you'd think Russia and France were the only two threats he'd ever had to deal with. According to Durov himself, they weren't even the ones that scared him the most. Durov claimed U.S. security agencies had quietly approached one of his engineers, trying to convince him to integrate certain open-source libraries into the app, tools Durov said he believed could have functioned as a backdoor. He also claimed FBI agents had approached him at airports asking questions, and that agents once showed up at a home he was renting, to explain why he never set up Telegram's headquarters in the United States. Then, in an interview with Lex Friedman released in 2025, Durov revealed something he'd sat on for 7 full years.
I felt very bad. I felt pain all over my body. I tried to get up and go to the bathroom, but while I was going there, I felt that functions of my body started to switch off. First the eyesight, then hearing, then I had difficulty breathing.
He believes someone tried to poison him in the spring of 2018. He kept it quiet, he said, because he didn't want to spook the company or make Telegram look vulnerable at a fragile moment. He never named a country, never named a suspect. Whatever actually happened that spring, one thing is clear: it didn't slow him down. Durov never just wanted a messaging app. He wanted to build an entire financial network, the Telegram Open Network, with a cryptocurrency called Gram, and he raised roughly $1.7 billion from investors to do it. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission ruled the Gram sale was an unregistered securities offering. The case ended with Telegram abandoning the original project entirely, agreeing to return more than $1.2 billion to investors and paying an $18.5 million civil penalty. America didn't shut down Telegram the app. It shut down Durov's plan to turn Telegram into its own parallel financial system, answerable to no government. And yet, somehow, Durov personally walked away from all of it, richer than almost anyone on the planet. Which raises a much simpler question nobody's actually answered. How much does this guy really have? According to Forbes, Durov's net worth in 2026 sits around $6.6 billion. In 2025, that estimate was $17.1 billion. That doesn't mean he lost $10 billion in cash in a single year. Most of that number is a valuation of his stake in a private company. So how much does he actually have in real, liquid terms? Nobody knows. There are no public records showing his bank balances or actual liquidity. He told French authorities his annual salary from Telegram is exactly 1 UAE dirham. He said he owns no real estate and keeps his personal wealth spread across banks and cryptocurrency.
So every piece of this story pulls in a different direction.
The real question is this: what happens when one person becomes more influential than most countries, without an army, without territory, without any real political power behind him?